Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. So what I'm going to try to talk in 20 minutes, and please throw me something if I don't, is what we are trying to do in Geneva with the project Visual Contagion. And mostly we are trying to use computational tool for the analysis of image globalization and for the analysis of image in the illustrated press. So in the history of representation, we are very well known that, but illustrated material, specifically periodics, have been a significant driving force. So they disseminated to artists specifically, but in general to a wider audience. But how can we study it at scale is a bit difficult. We try to study this dissemination, we try to study image globalization case by case, but we still do not see that many patterns. So the idea behind the project is try to go over that, try to apply computational method in order to comprehend image globalization. So that's exactly what the Visual Contagion project is trying to do for the last 3 years, or actually is doing. And as you may see in the slide, we are a bunch of people, captained by Beatrice Joyer-Prunel, with many of you well known, and we are actually working and constructing a corpus of illustrated periodical that start from 1890 till the advent of internet, even though we have reviewed it until 2020. And we are trying to apply computer vision algorithm, but also data science and network science to actually understand how image disseminate, how image circulate, both across different community, but also across the globe. So we are looking at sources that are coming from all over the place. The idea behind it is to determine the cultural axis of movement. To determine if there is a structure, we tend to study centers, such as Paris and New York. We want to verify if that is correct, or the structure of actual circulation is way more complex than that. In order to do so, we actually start to collect a corpus. Quite large, I have to admit. Indeed, until 2 days ago, these are the most recent number. We have around 20,000 different periodicals that are being published in 1,250 cities, more or less, comprising circa 50 countries. And out of this digitized periodical that we collected, that count 3.6 million issues, million numbers, we start to process them using some actually known method. Doc Extractor is actually a library available to everyone. We collect them, I forgot to mention, quite importantly, in IIIF, but more to that later. And we start to use this algorithm to extract images that are in these issues. And based on that, we collected a large corpus that we start to process together. So we have been processing using different methods. We initially start with ResNet, but with an algorithm based on ResNet. But currently, we are actually processing using VIT, a VIT network that using Dino methodology, therefore an unsupervised training method. Why this? We did some qualitative tests, I have to say, but it works extremely well for digitized material. Digitized material have different color, different tones. There are a lot of changing contrast between the same images, and actually the algorithm is very good in finding similarity across such a different range of different tonality. Now, all of this is not, we don't do it by hand. We built up a free-to-use platform, which is called Explore, which take an input to IIIF manifest and automatically download, classify, and extract the image, classify them, and present the result to the user. And it's exactly, in the video that you see are the resulting cluster that we can explore. But most importantly, we can actually tag them and reorganize them. We do not stop at what the machine provides us. That is the first step, but we want to have a human intervention. So we want to reorganize our content, which are based, of course, on what we want to study with. As you may see here, we can actually see the content in context, and we do not simply extract the image while we provide a link to it so that we can actually check where the image is embedded with. There is many things to say about the platform, but instead of showing you a bunch of video, I just tell you, you can just go in, request a free account, test for yourself. The address is the one that you can find in the slide. This is a great tool. This is a fantastic method. This is like the high end of the computational part, but how we can use it, actually. How can we extract knowledge from it? And how can we know more about image circulation? And my respect to be able to understand exchange, really, to understand how images circulate, we need to look at two axes. The very first is the one of a similarity. So what are the similarity information? And on the other end, we need to look at the production information, therefore how things come to be. And if we start to look at production information and the image information in this case, what we do is we extract from each of the review that we analyze a series of basic metadata that describe few of the characteristics that we can find, and such as where they were published, and what is the title, and such as the date. So we have a basic spatiotemporal information that we transitively associate to each image, and therefore for each image we always know when it was published, where it was published, belonging to which review. And on top of that, okay, maybe just a note, if you're trying to do this on a scale of 14 million images, and a global scale, you're going to have some problem, which related a bit on data curation and data engineering. Let's say that just in a brief list of things, toponym change over time. There is semantic shift also that you need to take into account. Data are not fully complete. If you are thinking about, for example, temporal data, sometimes the year is indicated, sometimes it's indicated the season, like spring, sometimes it's indicated instead just the month, and depends. We also found issue with different calendars. And we had to convert all this to somehow a normalized format that point to the same type of entities, the same place, etc., and the same type of coordinate too. We also add on top of that one important information that it cannot be transitively applied to the image, but is another descriptor that we find very important, which is the community of readers that the journal has been published for. So there are some journals for the avant-garde that clearly are, for example, concerned with readers that know avant-garde or artists that are in avant-garde. There are humoristic journals, there are fashion journals, but we have an internal vocabulary that we use to actually tag most of the time manually, because we couldn't access subject data from OCLC or other platform, manually this type of journal when we start to ingest them. So this require a bit of time, but based on that, we know what actually the publication is working towards. And this is the base for the production information. These are 4 types of information which are very basic, but somehow allow a basic but important level of analysis. We see the other axis. The other axis is similarity. From the similarity standpoint, we take the computation that is done through Explore, and therefore the grouping of the similarity of the image together, and we are able to extract such a result. I mean, not through very difficult method. If you use it, you may be able to. Is a CSV that you can extract, and for each image, we actually therefore have is pairing with a specific cluster ID, therefore with a specific group of other images. And based on the combination of both of the information, we are actually able to project this image in space and time and order them, sort them together based on data publication and similarity. So we do that. When we do that, we start to construct what we call circulation chain, which represent a set of similar images reproduced in different place and in different date and different magazine. As you may see here in the slide. The very first, the one that initiates the chain, we call it primitive image. We identify it for analytical reason, which is somehow an image that is located upstream in the chain of circulation. And by chaining similar images, we can produce diverse concatenation that can tell us how and when an image circulates across diverse journals and diverse places. So just if we actually project this in a map, we have some visual trajectory that showcase the adoption by different country and different publisher of an image. And the study of the phenomenon at scale can help us reveal some pattern in circulation, but also some economical pattern or the lack of, for example. So if I take all of this and I actually create for all the corpus, I'll create chain of circulation and start to project them all together, this is what you get. You get a map that allows you to see how circulation, specifically in the North Atlantic, is evolve over space and time. We can actually focus on a specific region or macro region, such as the case, for example, Western Europe, and see for the role of Paris, or minor region that as soon as you zoom, you can see way better, actually, the exchange at a local scale. And we can do that with whatever other region. So how we achieve that? Very basic. What we have is a hybrid architecture. So if from one side we use computer vision pipeline to actually extract this image and group them together, the other side, we take all of that is in IIIF, we encoded the metadata, we apply some data curation pipeline through it, and we created a graph of connection and a set of API. And then we can put together this result. And we put together this result, which lives separately in two different platforms, just for analytical purpose. So when we put them together, they are already interconnected because we keep the proper ID from one side to the other. So there is no effort there. But when we want to do some analysis, we just put them together and mostly use Python or other tools to do something with it. Now I'm going to show you very briefly what we were working on in the last couple of years at this point. Starting from where we start to apply network science to actually trying to understand this corpus. This is one of the first visualizations that I made, and it showcased the interaction in between cities, for example. So in this case, somehow very easy visualization, and it showed the interaction that are between cities and between cities in different countries. The color code is the country, and how these are interrelated. But then we start to move, because we say, okay, well, we start to analyze the global corpus. We saw what circulate the most, but we start to focus on single case study. Mostly two in this case. One is about avant-garde, because we are specialists, or at least Beatrice Viepronel is a specialist of avant-garde, I'm not. But we start to use it to actually understand how in the internal market of avant-garde image circulate to our switch review, which initiate circulation, and which one is the more impactful for the creation of the movement. And we can see that through a series of graphs, but this one is particularly nice because it shows from each review that start a circulation where the image goes. So in the avant-garde, always in the avant-garde sector. And we can analyze the various reviews which are considered prominent in the area and understand if they really are from a circulation perspective, or analyze at a country level. And therefore seeing, for example, France talk more with certain country in respect to other, or Germany, or many others. So we can actually understand better how circulation occur. And when we project this information in space, we actually notice certain patterns that were not there before. For example, the part of East Europe is extremely important for avant-garde circulation. And Paris acts more as a distributor than actually a place where you create and publish image for the first time. But is extremely good in taking image the editorial is extremely good in taking image created elsewhere and republishing them, and after that they get distributed more. So the role of a city and the role of the movement that there is in a city can change very differently if we apply certain type of methods. Another important thing that we touch upon is, for example, which community of reader are taking more image coming from other community of reader. This is the case with avant-garde. We did also for the global corpus, but in case of image from avant-garde, we see that certain type of community are more receptive, specifically the architectural community, and then after through certain type of publications, specifically in humoristic journal, they reach general public. But you see that we have a certain type of pattern in distribution. We did similar investigation. I focus on car, and actually in the advertisement and presence of car imagery in the beginning of the 20th century, and actually the lack of negative imagery on cars. And thanks to, I mean, I'm showcasing tools, but in general, what the tools helped me with this investigation was actually to identify that there is a very little presence of negative imagery of cars, while there is a lot of protest at the beginning of the 20th century against car and the presence of car in the city, because of course there were a lot of deaths caused by car. And it was nice to understand, to try to find out why, but another tool, another important thing, we noticed that when we are calculating movement, what it doesn't appear is actually as a thing get republished into the same spot. So then it's not a stasis if a point doesn't change. It may simply be that things do not go over to other market. So we try to look at it using different tools, such as a space-time cube that allow us to see, for example, that how the movement of an image stay in the same spot. However, it can be quite complicated to see this on an aggregated perspective. It's actually, we can see some pattern, but it is very difficult to understand very well what we can do. So this is what we managed to do with what we currently have. But we currently have a lot. We currently have a lot of images. We currently have a lot of computational methodology that we can apply, but I believe, also in the spirit of the presentation in the morning, that is also nice to look at what is missing and look at what is challenging and what is not there. And for example, if we took simply at the axis of circulation, this is what we can get already by this combination that we put in place. But there are some extremely important information which are not there in the project. They may be very well in the future, but currently this thing needs to be more researched. First of all, the number of copies. What does it mean to circulate? It's not simply an exchange, it's not simply an image that gets represented, maybe in another context, but anyhow reused. But the periodic macrocosm is quite large, and being published in one review versus another is also extremely important. We know it case by case. I know very well if something on Punch is more important than other humoristic periodical, but we need to know that we need to have like somehow a close reading of the source. In this case, we may be able to if we start to incorporate this data, we may be able to have a more distant perspective, trying to understand the actual impact that an image has for a community. To do so, we need, of course, to understand how many copies of that are distributed. Now, to my knowledge, the only source I could find of that was extremely grateful for a person who published an index of them in 1957. This is absolutely not there, or at least I could not find it. If you have any experience with it and you have sources, please let me know. But there is no aggregation of distributed copy. And that will be extremely useful to actually understand the penetration. Same thing can be said for the price. Price are not just important to understand which public are we talking to, but also to understand how things change. Advertisement takeover starting in US, then in Europe, already at the beginning of the last century. Therefore, the price of publication reduced, but that also means that maybe some negative imagery that was there, that was now provided by advertisement, is not there anymore. Last but not least, the reach. I didn't show you a card with all the point of the city and how many sources we do have on each cities. For a simple reason, this does not give me exactly the geographical spread. This gives me a lot of information about the publishing industry, because I may very well know that in France the publishing industry is mainly in Paris, but what it will be more important to understand sometimes is the reach. Some publications are local, some publications are national, some publications are for specific community. And just think, for example, on the one made during World War II, where there were not so much information about where it was published, but that's not the only case. And some publications are actually more international. So think about just The Economist. The Economist is available not just in London. Putting a point in London does not give me everything I need to know, also because they have a North American version, which also has a place of publication in London. Therefore, what should I put? How can we deal with that? This is, I believe that we need to create a new axis here, which is the axis of response, not only on production and similarity, where we actually need to contextualize such investigation with the distribution, cost, and reach function. And to do so, however, we need to create first the data for most of it, because they're not fully present. And the computational things can be done, but maybe the historical, we need to focus more on actually producing this data first and foremost. And I believe these are the new direction that the research on visual contagion need to take, and the project that work on historical movement of image should also consider. And we don't have time to talk about this, but thank you very much.
Wonderful. Another 9 minutes for questions. Mia?
Yeah, thank you. Super interesting. So my question actually rises from my own problems in my own research. So it's nice to ask others these kinds of questions. Maybe you will give me the right answer. I think kind of like looking at the circulation of images is super interesting, and it kind of like relates to circulation of knowledge and I was just thinking kind of like, could you talk a little bit more about how do you measure the influence? Because of course we can see that we can measure similarity, and we can see that these images are similar that were published in Paris and in London, but I have been struggling with finding the kind of like, because if images are similar, it doesn't mean that there is influence. Although one was published this year and the other next year, we can't see the influence. I can't say that there is an influence between that. So how have you dealt with this question in your research?
So excellent question, first of all. And on a scale of 14 million of image, I can't. I mean, I can do some basic computation and tell you and give you some basic number, but what I realize is, for example, doing the case study on avant-garde, is that there we can actually compute influence based on the chain of circulation and based on the number, how many primitive images that, therefore the first one that create chains, are actually produced by one review in order to understand how the review communicate with each other, because we know the context. And the context is the editorial. We're looking at other review and then repurposing something. But that can be done, at least in my head, only I would say a case by case. And the avant-garde we know. We see that somehow there is some influence in reaching other communities, because certain cultural community are generally not reached by avant-garde, but they're reached more by art journal, and therefore the passage you can see that the publication talk more with other art journal, it passed them more images, or somehow the a journal from art and not avant-garde read more that review, and therefore it become more influential. But this was the only somehow criteria that I was thinking about when I was looking at the avant-garde. The other thing to understand influence will be to understand number of copies, of course, and contextualize that information with that. And I would really love to do that, but no one is giving me the data, and this is gonna, just do that is gonna take me a few years. So if you find a way to do it globally, I mean, I believe we can check that, but it need to be, it's a value that need to be forcefully contextualized.
Another question, Alice?
I am wondering, how do you consider the metadata of the artworks reproduced in the reviews, and if it can impact your reflection on circulation?
We did, that's why I was mentioning that. So first of all, the platform is not going to give you metadata of the artwork. That will be, well, we will need to pass through another processing that somehow would identify each of the artwork and assign it the correct title and name. And I don't know how successful that may be. What we did, actually, was curating them manually. So we have a series of collection, I didn't mention, but you can create collections, share them in Explore, and reorganize the content. That's what I meant by retouching. It is not only what the machine gives us. The machine allows us to search images, but allow us to reorganize them. So what we did, we went there, we created a collection internally, and we start to classify individual artworks, putting the information in the series and through tags and through external metadata of the author, the title, and looking only singularly as them. We have a specific function that given one image that you may upload or is present in the corpus, you can search all the similar images that are in 14 million. Therefore, starting from, as soon as we find an image of an artwork, we start to find all of them that portray the same things, and we create a collection for it. And, well, I will have to log in on my account, but we have a lot of it, and we actually study them separately. So, for example, for the movement, we can look at the chain of circulation for each individual artwork, and then maybe gather them based on specific characteristic, or if you want, even style, and see how those spread over the globe.
Thank you. Good. Clarisse?
Thank you. You mentioned that at some point you decided to do manual work. And I was wondering, because sometimes we have the dream to automate everything. And so why do you choose to stop automating and go for manual work? And how do you decide that? And what are the criteria for that? I was really wondering, you know, when do you stop to automate things?
Okay, that's a great question. So when you start to lose more time in general, very shortly, when you realize that you spend days and you don't get any result and you are tired. But that's in general what happened, really.
It's a good answer.
But what we actually went through is that we realized that, for example, for the artwork, the machine could not arrive to do so because of time. So there are, Artminer is a fantastic algorithm, for example, which is made in Paris by the team of Mathieu Aubry, which is worked very well in identifying exactly the same picture. This is what you need, for example, for artwork. You give them an artwork and you need to identify only the exact, or the one that has extremely similar characteristics. Now, if you need to do that, and it's going to be a pair by pair. So each image needs to be confronted with another, all the feature, and then another image, and then another image. When we reach a corpus already from the beginning of 3 million, and this was the real beginning, doing that will take years. Therefore, that was a great, okay, we cannot do that. We need to find a mechanism that allow us to still work on it without sacrificing too much time. I think we had to strike a balance through that. We do not have what we wish for, but we have a system that somehow allows us to move forward. And certain things, this is for an algorithm, is possible. Certain other are maybe not possible. The contextualization of certain collection For example, I'm thinking, we have Marie Barras, is a PhD student of Beatrice in our team and is working on fashion industry. And he made an incredible collection of corsets where you can see that initially they were, the corset was actually portrayed singularly without any body. And at a certain point, bodies start to appear. And they start to appear and they become more and more somehow visible and more a part of the illustration. This she did a collection manually. I don't believe this collection would be possible if she didn't do it manually. So somehow it's about the limits, somehow it's about the time, somehow it's a mix between the two.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking again Nicola for his presentation this morning.